The ambient glow of Canlis, one of Seattle's most prestigious fine dining restaurants, cast soft golden reflections against the glass walls overlooking Lake Union. Around the white linen table sat 6 people. My son Brandon, his wife Chloe, her parents Richard and Eleanor Vance, my longtime friend Paul, and me. We were celebrating my 62nd birthday, as well as 30 years of my late husband's medical practice, a legacy that had funded our family's lifestyle for decades. I wore a simple black silk dress and my mother's vintage pearl necklace. Across from me sat Chloe, draped in a $3,000 designer blazer, sipping $200 Cabernet Sauvignon, while casually discussing their upcoming 3-week luxury vacation to Amalfi, Italy. Brandon was 34. For the past 5 years, ever since he quit his mid-level marketing job to launch a boutique venture capital firm, I had been quietly keeping his household afloat. Every month, $3,200 automatically transferred from my late husband's trust fund to Brandon's account. I paid the private school tuition for my 8-year-old granddaughter, Maya. I paid their home insurance. I even paid the property taxes on their 4-bedroom craftsman house in Mercer Island. I did it because Brandon was my only child, after my husband Thomas passed away 4 years ago from aggressive pancreatic cancer. Brandon was all the family I had left. Or so I believed. "Mom," Brandon said, tapping his wine glass gently with his silver fork. "Before the main course arrives, Chloe and I have a quick announcement to make." Chloe smiled, a bright engineered smile that never quite reached her eyes. She pulled a thick white envelope from her handbag and slid it across the table toward me. "We know how much you value your peace and quiet, Clara," Chloe said softly, using that calm, condescending tone people usually reserve for fragile toddlers. "And honestly, managing that 4-bedroom house on your own is getting too stressful for you. You're 62. Your knees are getting worse and the stairs are dangerous." I looked down at the envelope. Printed on the corner was the crest of Shady Pines Senior Living, a mid-tier assisted living facility located 90 minutes north in rural Skagit County. I didn't open it. I looked directly into my son's eyes. "What is this, Brandon?" Brandon cleared his throat, adjusting his expensive Rolex, a gift I had bought him for his 30th birthday. "Mom, hear us out. We've already placed a deposit on a beautiful 1-bedroom suite for you up there. It's quiet. They have staff to handle your meals, your medicine, and your housekeeping." "A senior facility?" Paul, my friend sitting beside me, interjected sharply. "Clara is a retired chief of pediatric nursing. She hikes 3 miles every weekend. She doesn't need assisted living." "Paul, please, stay out of family business," Chloe snapped, dropping her sweet facade for a fraction of a second before turning back to me with exaggerated concern. "Clara, we're doing this because we love you. But also, Brandon needs to convert your house in Queen Anne into our secondary residence and home office. His firm is expanding." "Your home office?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "That house was built by Thomas and me. It's completely paid off." "Which makes it a wasted asset with you living in it alone," Chloe blurted out, losing her patience. "You're taking up 3,500 square feet. If we move our investment firm into your property, we save $6,000 a month in commercial rent. Plus, the facility in Skagit County is much more affordable for your monthly budget." The waiter arrived with the main courses: steaks, pan-seared halibut, expensive truffle butter sides. No one touched their food. I looked at Brandon. "You want me to move 90 minutes away from my home, my friends, and my granddaughter so you can take my house for free?" Brandon wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked down at his plate. "Mom, it's just practical. You're always complaining about being lonely. Up there, you'll have people your own age. Besides, Chloe's parents are moving into our guest suite next month to help with Maya, so we really need the extra space." The puzzle pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. They weren't worried about my health. They wanted Chloe's wealthy, influential parents living close to them, and they needed my mortgage-free prime real estate to support their illusion of high society success. They didn't see a mother who had sacrificed her savings for them. They saw an obstacle sitting on top of valuable property. "And what happens to the $3,200 monthly allowance I transfer to you?" I asked quietly. Chloe gave a cold, dismissive chuckle. Well, obviously, you'll keep transferring that to us. The assisted living facility fee will be paid directly out of Thomas's remaining pension. You won't have any daily expenses anyway, so you won't need that money. They had mapped out my entire life. They had calculated my pension, my real estate, my physical displacement, and my complete isolation, all while eating a dinner paid for by my credit card. I looked at the thick white envelope resting on the white tablecloth. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. The grief that had weighed down my chest since my husband died suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp, crystal clear focus. I reached out, picked up my champagne glass, and took a small sip. I see, I said softly. You've thought this through very carefully. So you'll sign the consent forms tonight? Chloe asked eagerly, pulling a heavy Parker pen from her purse. The facility needs the signed transfer agreement by Friday to lock in the lower rate. I'll give you my answer first thing tomorrow morning, I replied, setting my glass down precisely in the center of my napkin. I stood up, took my coat from the back of the chair, and looked at my son. Enjoy the dinner, Brandon. Put it on my tab. It's the last meal I will ever pay for. Before anyone could reply, I turned and walked out of the restaurant into the cool Seattle night, with Paul right behind me. A cow. When I arrived home at my Queen Anne Craftsman house that night, the silence didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like tactical clarity. Paul sat at my kitchen island while I made a pot of black coffee. Clara, what are you going to do? He asked, his hands folded over a notepad. Brandon is legally on the family trust as a contingent beneficiary. If he pushes hard enough with his corporate lawyers, he might try to declare you incompetent to seize the deed. He can try, I said, setting down 2 mugs. But Thomas was a surgeon, Paul. He didn't just practice medicine. He built bulletproof legal structures. It's time I actually read what my husband left behind. By 1 a.m., my dining room table was covered in bank statements, property deeds, tax filings, and insurance policies. For 4 years, I had handed total financial trust to Brandon because grief had made me numb. But as I cross-referenced my bank accounts with his venture capital firm business filings, a horrifying pattern emerged. Brandon wasn't just taking my $3,200 monthly gift. 3 years ago, when I was recovering from knee surgery, Brandon had asked me to sign a temporary power of attorney so he could handle my property tax appeals. Embedded in those documents was authorization for him to link his business account to my late husband's high-yield investment portfolio as an authorized secondary user. He hadn't just been receiving a gift. He had been quietly siphoning an additional $2,500 every single month under the guise of portfolio management fees. Over 36 months, he had drained over $90,000 of my savings to pay for Chloe's luxury cars, their Italian vacations, and their high society country club memberships. They didn't just want my house. They were accelerating their demands because my liquid investment account was almost dry, and they needed my real estate to cover their spiraling debt. At 7 a.m. on Wednesday morning, I didn't call Brandon. I drove straight to downtown Seattle to meet with Arthur Vance. Not Chloe's father, but a senior estate attorney who had been Thomas's closest college friend. Arthur spent 2 hours reviewing the documents, his face growing darker with every page. Clara, Arthur said, taking off his glasses. This temporary power of attorney was drafted with vague language, but it's completely revocable at your sole discretion. Furthermore, the property deed to this house is held under a private living trust, where you are the sole trustee. Brandon has 0 legal ownership. He's living on pure assumption. Revoke everything, Arthur, I said firmly. Every power of attorney, every secondary user access, every authorized credit card, and transfer the trust's primary banking entity to a completely different institution today. Consider it done, Arthur replied, pulling out a fresh legal stack. What about the monthly transfers? Cut them to 0. By 11:30 a.m., I was back at my house. I hired a local locksmith service. Within 2 hours, every exterior deadbolt on my four-bedroom home was replaced with high-security electronic smart locks. Next, I logged into my laptop and systematically went down the list. Maya's private school tuition. I called the administration office. Instead of paying the full year upfront for Brandon as I usually did, I transferred the remaining balance into a restricted educational trust fund, locked until Maya turned 18, meaning neither Brandon nor Chloe could touch a single penny for their personal expenses. Luxury SUV lease. The secondary vehicle Chloe drove was registered under my family trust's corporate liability account. I called the dealership, paid the early termination fee, and scheduled a flatbed tow truck to repossess the vehicle from their driveway. The family trust credit cards canceled instantly. At 3:15 p.m., my phone began to buzz furiously on the kitchen counter. First came a text from Chloe. Clara, my card just got declined at the day spa. Is there a glitch with the bank? Call me ASAP. 5 minutes later, a frantic call from Brandon. I let it go to voicemail. His message echoed through my phone speaker, his voice tight with rising panic. Mom, what is going on? The bank says my venture firm account has been unlinked from Dad's portfolio. And the dealership just called saying they're coming to pick up Chloe's Range Rover. Call me right now, this isn't funny. I didn't call back. Instead, I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey tea and sat on my front porch, watching the ferry boats cross Puget Sound in the afternoon sun. At 5 p.m., a sleek white sedan screeched into my driveway. Brandon and Chloe practically fell out of the doors, sprinting up my front walkway. Brandon's face was flushed red, his tie half unbuttoned, while Chloe held her phone like a weapon. Brandon reached the porch steps, trying to insert his old brass key into my front door lock. It wouldn't even fit into the new keyhole. What did you do to the locks? Brandon yelled, banging his fist against the heavy oak wood. Mom, open this door. I sat calmly in my rocking chair, holding my warm teacup, looking down at them through the porch railing. You don't need a key to my house anymore, Brandon, I said softly, my voice perfectly steady. Since you decided I belong in a senior facility in Skagit County, I decided you belong on your own balance sheet. Are you insane? Chloe screamed from the driveway. My car is being towed in an hour. We have a dinner reservation with investors tonight. You can't just cut off our accounts without notice. I didn't cut off your accounts, Chloe, I replied, looking her dead in the eye. I simply stopped you from stealing mine. Brandon stood frozen on the porch steps, his mouth slightly open as my words hung in the crisp Seattle air. Stealing? He stammered, trying to regain his composure while casting a frantic glance toward the quiet street. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm your son. I've been managing Dad's portfolio to protect our family's future. You've been siphoning $2,500 every month on top of my $3,200 allowance to fund an imaginary venture capital firm and a lifestyle you didn't earn, I said, setting my teacup down on the small wooden table beside me. Over $90,000 drained in 3 years. I have every bank statement printed and audited by Arthur Vance. Chloe's pale face turned completely white at the mention of Arthur Vance's name. As the daughter of a corporate attorney, she knew precisely what a former senior estate judge's involvement meant. Clara, please, Chloe said, her voice dropping its sharp edge and shifting into a desperate, rehearsed tone. We were just looking out for your safety. Skagit County was just a suggestion. We can talk about this like reasonable adults. Let us inside. There is nothing left to discuss, I replied. Your key doesn't work because this is my home, built by Thomas and me. It will never be your secondary office, and your parents will not be moving into my guest room. Mom, Brandon pleaded, taking a step closer to the porch rail. The mortgage on our Mercer Island house is due on Friday. If you cut off the secondary user access and the trust allowance, we can't make the payment. We'll lose the house. What about Maya? I've already secured Maya's future, I answered calmly. I transferred her tuition funds into a restricted trust that pays the school directly. Her education is completely safe. But your mortgage, your luxury SUV, and your country club dues are your responsibility. You are 34 years old, Brandon. It's time you learned how to be a father instead of a dependent. Before Brandon could answer, a large flatbed tow truck pulled up to the curb behind Chloe's white sedan. The driver stepped out, holding a clipboard with the official vehicle repossession order signed by the trust's legal team. Chloe let out a choked gasp, clutching her designer bag as the tow truck driver began positioning the steel ramps behind her leased Range Rover. "Brandon, do something!" she shrieked. "Tell them they can't take the car." Brandon looked at the tow truck, then at Chloe, and finally up at me. For the first time in his adult life, the polished, confident illusion he had built was completely shattered. He didn't look like a high-powered venture capitalist. He looked like a panicked child realizing the safety net was gone forever. "If you don't unlock these accounts by Friday," Brandon said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and panic, "we won't be coming back here, Mom. You'll never see us or Maya again." It was the ultimate threat, the classic emotional blackmail every entitled child uses when financial control fails. I stood up from my rocking chair and walked slowly to the edge of the porch railing. "Maya will always know where her grandmother lives, Brandon," I said softly. "And when she is old enough to understand the truth, she will know I kept her future safe. But as for you and Chloe, if the only reason you visit me is to collect a check or push me into an asylum to take my home, then your absence is not a punishment. It's peace." I turned, walked into my warm house, and shut the heavy oak door. I slid the new brass deadbolt into place. Through the double pane glass, I heard Chloe screaming at the tow truck driver, followed by the sound of Brandon slamming his car door in defeat before their engine roared away down the street. The months that followed brought a quiet, profound transformation to my life. Without my financial backing, Brandon and Chloe's house of cards collapsed rapidly. They were forced to sell their Mercer Island property at a loss to clear their mounting credit debt, downsizing into a modest two-bedroom rental apartment closer to Brandon's new entry-level corporate job, a job he was finally forced to take to support his family. Chloe's parents, realizing there was no free luxury estate waiting for them in Queen Anne, chose to stay in their own state. I didn't waste my days in bitterness. I used my reclaimed savings to restore Thomas's garden behind the house, hired a contractor to update the kitchen, and booked a 2-week solo trip to Alaska that Thomas and I had always talked about taking. Every Tuesday afternoon, I picked Maya up from her private school. I took her for ice cream, helped her with her homework, and gave her the unconditional love of a grandmother who was no longer exhausted by silent sacrifice. Brandon never tried to stop our Tuesday visits. He knew Arthur Vance's legal team was watching every move, and he couldn't afford another public exposure. One rainy evening in late October, as I sat by the fireplace reading a book with a hot cup of tea, my phone chimed. It was a text from Brandon. "Mom, payday was today. I paid our rent and groceries entirely on my own salary for the first time." Maya asked about Papa Thomas's garden. "Can we come over this Sunday? Just to visit? No talk about money, just family." I looked at the screen for a long time. I didn't feel an urge to rush over and hand him a check, nor did I feel spiteful. I felt the quiet strength of a woman who had finally set a boundary strong enough to save her own life, and perhaps finally force her son to grow up. I typed a simple, deliberate reply. "The garden looks beautiful, Brandon. Sunday at 2 p.m., I'll make tea." I set the phone down on the side table, took a slow sip from my mug, and watched the soft rain fall over the city I loved. My life was my own again, unshakable, independent, and entirely peaceful.